So the mental, emotional, spiritual part of you, mental means the brain, how the brain works, and a lot of people's brain does not work correctly. One of the big things that causes the brain to not work correctly is lack of water. If you're 5% low in water, your brain will decrease in function. If you look up online and ask the question, is water a stimulant? The answer is yes. Somebody asked me yesterday about doing a coffee enema and the fact that it's a stimulant. Well, so is water. I mean, so don't get hung up on that. And coffee, when you do a coffee enema, has a total different effect than when you drink it. So don't go there. Now, emotional, the part of the triangle. The emotional part is the feeling part. The feeling part occurs in your head but more in your heart. And what you think about always affects you emotionally. And then there's the third part, the spiritual part of you. The spiritual part of you is the true you, your true identity. And the goal in what I teach is to help you get all three, the mental, emotional, and spiritual, congruent, in harmony with each other, and balanced. Now, in order for the top part of the triangle to be in harmony, the corners of the triangle also have to be neutral. One corner is structure. Structure includes bones, muscles, ligaments, nerves, tendons, joints. They need to be balanced. So the center of the head is in the middle, shoulder level, hips level, feet proper, etc., etc. Now the other corner is chemical. Chemical is what goes into the body. In any way, whether you breathe it, rub it on, put it in the mouth, or any other way. The chemical corner also includes how it's used. A lot of people have problems with the use of nourishment, the use of proper nutrition, because they have a problem with the gut. For some reason, the digestive system is not functioning properly. Most of the time, it is due to misaligned structure. Something's out of line in the back that affects the nerves, that goes to an organ or a couple of organs, some part of your digestive system. So that's kind of the overview. Now today we're going to specialize our topic and correlate two parts of the triangle. We're going to correlate the mental, emotional, spiritual part to the structure part. And let me tell you why. Way back when I was getting out of chiropractic college, I joined a research group. We were trying to determine which chiropractic technique worked the best. That's one thing. The other thing we're trying to do is measure the spine alignment to see if there's a correlation between the degree of sickness and health relative to spine alignment. What we learned was this: people who are most healthy have a neutral spine. Head center, shoulders level, nice front to back curve. When people get sicker, they go further off. So we could take an x-ray of this full spine from the front and the side, sitting or standing, and we could tell how sick they were. So we could categorize them and the intensity of their health problem based on the biomechanical alignment. Now, recently, Joe Biden's been talking about rebuilding a lot of bridges because they're breaking down. And the fact is, a lot of bodies are breaking down. A lot of bodies are breaking down. In fact, when we get done today, you're gonna think, I think everybody's sick, based on what Dr. Smith said. And if you think that, you're right. It's very rare to find a person who's relatively healthy. To me, relatively healthy means a B, what? How good of a grade?
Oh, B
A B.
plus.
A B. If you're a B plus, you're way above average. Most people function less than a B. They survive. So now back to the head, the structure. The brain doesn't work right. The emotions doesn't work right if the head is too tight. If the head gets too tight and torqued, then we have a problem with function of the whole triangle. Okay, so moving on. We're going to correlate today the top part of the triangle with the structural part. What we learned from our research was with chiropractic, the lighter the technique, the better the correction. So the hard rack 'em, crack 'em, pop and pray, and try to force them, those people feel better for a short time, but they don't get what we call recovery. Recovery comes slowly over a period of time by using light pressure, giving assistance to the body's remodeling process. Now the body automatically remodels all the time. It's either getting better or it's getting worse. You think of the words adaptation. The tissue will always adapt to the current tissue tolerance. I'll give you an example. If you're driving out in the country and there's an old bridge that's been there 50 years, and you drive across it with a big potato truck loaded with potatoes, and the bridge crashes in, guess what? It adapted. It adapted to the stress. And what was the adaptation? Breakdown. So when you exceed tissue tolerance in any corner of the triangle, the adaptation is not always good. In fact, it's probably about half good and half bad. In order for the adaptation to be good, you have to be below tissue tolerance. You have to do it often. I call it repetitive microtherapy. So when you do the things like the T-zone and the sacral slide, you want to stay right below pain, right on the edge of pain. And on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm talking about a 5. You know, a 1, 2, or 3, that's not a big issue. But real pain is like a 5 or above. Now, part of what our research included was we found out that regardless of what we did structurally with chiropractic, massage, rolfing, physical therapy, whatever physical technique we used to help align people, they didn't get well. They stayed sick. We were confused because they were doing a lot of things right. They usually worked, but in about a third of the cases, it didn't work. They didn't go into recovery. They stayed sick. And one day in our group of discussion on these problem cases, the psychologist brought up the question, maybe what we've been telling them is true. We've been telling them that you're sick because of what's in your head, your thinking patterns, your feeling patterns. That's the word. Your pattern of thinking, your pattern of behavior. We said, well, we're feeling. Why don't you take these people and you treat them? You treat their head. So they did the examinations. I don't know if you've ever been examined by a psychologist, but it's not fun. You answer about 600 questions, And some of them say, I know I've answered this 3 times before, but when they get done, they then correlate all the numbers, all the answers, and say, okay, you have this pattern, you have this pattern, you have this pattern. So what we did was correlated what we saw in X-ray with the patterns that the psychologists found. And so if people, I'll give you an example, when people lean forward more than is acceptable range, they were excessively aggressive. So the psychologists would put them in that category. If they were back, they were passive, non-assertive. Those are 2 patterns that jumped right out. We also find that men have a tendency to go to lean left. And when they lean left, the brain works different than when they're centered. And if they go too far left, the brain gets messed up. They do excessive behavior logically. And women go the other way. And you know women are always right.
I was going to say emotional, but
That's the same thing. They want to be, they're emotional, they're sensitive, they're caring, they're loving. That's the female pattern. But if they go too far out of, today I'll use the words, rather than tissue tolerance, I'll use the words acceptable range. And I'm going to hand out a piece of paper that shows you what the acceptable ranges are. So the psychologists then worked with the people for a while, and they sent them back to the chiropractors who were doing the research, and we took new x-rays, and guess what we found? Improvement. They had better alignment, better curves, more normal function, because they got their head screwed back on straight, or tied to whatever they had needed to do.
Partly.
Pardon?
Partly.
Partly, yeah, partly.
No, 7.
Now, a part of the question they came up was, if we get a person realigned, will they stay? That was the other problem we ran into. Some people with physical, mechanical therapy only would make improvement, and then 2 years later, they go off crooked again because they hadn't changed the thought patterns. So with all that said and done, what I've done with my people over the years is shared with them what I learned in reduced content, some of the basic principles to do 2 things. 1, help themselves become more neutral and aligned, mental, emotional, spiritual, knowing that if they do, and when they do, it helps align the spine, so they need less care, okay? I like to do reevaluations, and because I'm a scientist, I like to take x-rays of the spine, so you see the spine now and then later, and then later. Some people we take over a period of time, several sets of films as they improved. The one thing that showed up also on the films was if they had an area like anger, for example. Today we're going to talk about internalizing anger. When a lot of good people get angry and they internalize it, they don't deal with it, they don't share it, they don't process it, they hold it in emotionally, and when they hold it in emotionally, it affects them chemically, so they get constipated. So if you hold the crap in, you hold the crap in. They also develop low back problems, female problems, prostate problems, problems in low back and that area of the body. Because they're good people, but they don't want to, what do you say, rock the boat, stir the soup. They like to just suck it up and let it go. But it doesn't go, it stays in the body and stores and breaks you down. So, are there any questions on what I've said to you so far today?
If you're a good person and you don't want to stir the soup or rock the boat, but you have anger, what's a healthy way to express it or deal with it so that you don't hold it in?
Well, my brother Kent would see you swear. He said some words are therapeutic. You get it out. In my book, I talked about the windshield wiper principle. You at that time, you clear off any negative feelings that you have. That's the same page. Any negative feelings you have, and you let it go. You don't hang on to it. You practice what the book teaches, and the book teaches to forgive. And that's how you deal with it. And you don't think about it. You get it out of your mind, because if you think about negative things, you give them power. This morning I saw a young lady who had tremendous family issues with 2 daughters. One died, one deserted this year. And she was in what I call loop. She had serious issues, and she goes around and around and around. So we did a clearing. That's where you think about the issue. Some of you have done a clearing on. And we think of the issue and a pattern, and we can disrupt the pattern. And it made a huge change in her life within 1 week. So you can release things simply by changing your thought pattern and focusing on different things and not doing the loops. The loops always hurt, because a loop, when you're in a loop, you're in a pattern. Now let's go quickly through this handout. The body is an outward expression, a manifestation of inner conscious and subconscious patterns. Now, under the word conscious, write the word golf ball, ping pong ball. The conscious mind can only think of one thing at a time. It's either on one side of the net or the other. The subconscious mind, I like to think of the word gets all. From conception on, it records thoughts, feelings, words, music, sound, attitudes. The baby subconscious mind soaks it up. So when the baby comes into the world, it's already has patterns that have been created during pregnancy. If you're all 17-year-old girls, soon to within that next years of having a baby, we'd have a whole discussion on how to prepare for motherhood, and that's one very important thing, is to keep your mind and your feelings where they belong. Now the pelvis is the base. It's the foundation. It should be level, just like when you build a house. And when we look at the pelvis from the front, sitting down, the hips, top of the hips should be even. When you stand up, the top of the femur head should be horizontal. Now, most people have at least slight deviation. The most common, normal, minor weakness is for a female to have a right low hip. That then causes the head up top to go which way? To the right, slightly, less than 1 inch. The pubis goes opposite the head to balance, to create the balance. Now, men are exactly opposite. Men have a foundation that's either level, or if they have a slight health problem, it's along the left, head goes left, pubis goes right. That's appropriate compensation for imbalance. We'll talk about that later when I hand out the other handout. The head from the side view should be in the middle, so the ear should be directly over the shoulder, the low back, and the malleolus, that's a little bone on the side of the ankle, that should be vertical. The thoracic spine, that's where we'll talk about both the thoracic and lumbar spine. That's the thoracic spine has the ribs. The ribs and that portion of the body should have a nice smooth curve. That part of the body is strongly related to your personality, your true identity. If you have a rigid spine and it's more flat, you're more stubborn, you're more set in your ways. If you have hunchback, too much kyphosis, it's called, then that creates a pattern in your mind, in your heart, where you hold back. You resist. You don't express who you really are or what you could be. And that's a common problem with rebellious teenagers. They slump down. When they slump down, they bend this down, the head goes forward. So part of them wants to be aggressive, part of them wants to hold back. It affects the low back, down here in the sacrum. When the sacrum goes back and is flat, instead of being up like this with a good lumbar curve, they then lose their desire for life. So sometimes people who have a negative curve in the low back, that's a very tight low back. Those people will have a tendency to have what's called a death wish. And that happens in young people, and it also happens in older men. In Idaho, the current #1 cause of death for teenagers, 16 to 22 or 3 or 4, is suicide. The #1 cause of death for old men, 72 and older, suicide. In Idaho, that's a very common occurrence. And it shows up in the structure. Now, part of why I'm talking to you about these patterns today is this. If you get a basic feel, a basic understanding for what we're talking about today, and you want to help people you associate with to become more healthy, you can look at their physical body and tell a lot about them. You can tell about their weaknesses. You can look at them and you can see their strength. For example, if we have a person, let's say a man is walking down the street or in church, in a mall, or whatever, he's limping on the left side, there's some kind of a male problem emotionally that he's dealing with.
Does natural aging, though, cause the body to hunch over
No,
and lean forward?
no.
Osteoarthritis.
Osteoarthritis is a softening of the bone that predisposes you to intensified breakdown if you're off balance. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Predisposes. That's all. Does it not cause? Same with AIDS. AIDS does not cause partial breakdown. Breaking laws causes breakdown. What kind of laws? We'll go back to we can go back to the triangle. if you have a lot of hate, it's going to affect your posture in your head. If you have a lot of anger, it's going to affect your posture. If you eat wrong, it's going to affect your gut, and that's going to affect your posture, and that's going to affect your head. It's all related. The thing you want to remember is life is like a two-edged sword. Anytime you do anything that's good, you help the body. Anytime you do anything that's bad, you hurt the body. Where? Everywhere. Everything matters. All the time. There's no free lunch. There's no time out. There's no pause. It's always going. It's like you're living on a hot ladder. You can't hang on and just hold still. You burn your feet and you burn your hands. You have to, you're moving. You're going to move up, you're going to move down. So part of the reason we have these discussions is to help you, help yourself be more healthy. And if you want, like I said, help other people. So if a man is limping on the left, he has a problem. And I guarantee you, most of the people you know have problems that are worse than yours. If you're limping on the right, it's a female issue. And the issues we'll talk about how severe they are depends on how much they limp. Same with the way they lean. If they lean to the left, then they're logical. Is it okay for a man to lean left? Yes, only about that far. If they go further than that, then the logic gets them in trouble because they have exceeded the body's ability to deal with the stress. Same with the woman. If a woman goes too far right, they're excessively emotional. Now, I have a daughter who's a single parent. She had to do both mom and dad for a long time. And guess what? She had to be superwoman. So she wanted to be emotional, but then she had to be logical. So she's going back and forth. Did it affect her health? Yes, it affected her health a lot. Did it affect her mind? Yes, it affected everything. But she did the best she could by going back and forth, back and forth. Okay, now going down. The standing pattern reflects the conscious pattern. Sitting down reflects subconscious. So when you see somebody sliding down, leaning back, that's a subconscious pattern. And it's pretty accurate. I could tell a lot of stories about people who I've seen and treated and helped change. It's very accurate. But all patterns can be modified if you're aware of the pattern and you do repetitive microtherapy. In other words, you're actively engaged in making some kind of an improvement. So again, going down. So to be what you want to be, you act as if you are. I think you see, fake it till you make it. Do what healthy people do. Now, if we had a few hours, we could make on a whiteboard, we could make a list of the top of the triangle. What do healthy people do for the brain? What do they do for the spirit? What do they do emotionally? We could list a whole bunch of things. We could also list a negatives. What do healthy people not do? In class yesterday, a lady asked about driving in traffic and how it affects her. And the truth is, you're not going to change the pattern that exists out there. So what should she do? Be neutral. It is what it is. And go within and be neutral within and only think those thoughts that are healthy. And all of you have the conscious control over your thinking. You know, the book says, let virtue, goodness, let thoughts unceasingly. That means you can control the channel. That's your conscious mind. So, you can read the rest of that later. I'm going to pass around to you this copy. This profile review is worth tens of thousands of dollars. It's very accurate. I've used this pattern for this concept for a long, long time. You can learn it to help yourself and to help other people. So we're going to start on this page, on the bottom picture. Looking at a body through the back. We start at the head. Normal, acceptable ranges are female goes right, male goes left, 0 to 12 millimeters. More than that is above tissue tolerance. Now we'll go to the bottom, we'll clear down to the pelvis. Same is true down there. Female low on the right, male low on the left. Now, I'm going to draw a circle for you. I think you can all see this. You see it? So in the center of the circle is me, that's self. Around the circle is, look at the words along the bottom of the page. What does it say? Self, spouse, family, right? Mm-hmm. So the more distant from you the issue is, the greater the pelvic drop. So if we look at you, I'll draw it this way. If you have a right leg deficiency, that's the female side, 5, 10, 15, 20, we get out on the emotional side, even when we get clear out to God. On the emotional side of God is mercy. The logical side, the left side, logic, is justice. So if we have a left drop, so we have a physical difference in the level of the pelvis. So when I said to you earlier, if you watch people walk, the more they go down, the more significant and involved the issue is. Now, any questions?
Yeah, so when you're saying that they have a limp,
Yeah.
see, I blew out my knees snow skiing and water skiing, so I do tend at times to drag my left leg.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm,
You have a male deficiency.
well, that's true, but.
That's what it means. Now, let me comment on that point. And the question really is, which comes first? The knee injury or the emotional pattern?
Well, I was in college, so I don't know. It could have.
Well, so the answer is, if you have one, you will get the other. For example, if I'm sitting in my car at a stop at an intersection, and I go and somebody runs the light or the stop sign, and they get hit from the right. That did happen to me. I get hit by an uninsured police officer in the fog with a pickup that knocked my car 90 feet and totaled it. It sprung me to the right. It changed my personality for a long time because I become, instead of left logical, it become emotional because it bent me. I worked different. I had to do active self-care to try to get back to normal self. Okay? We had a couple here yesterday who he had an accident recently, and after the class I asked the question, do you think that changed his personality? I guess they both said, oh yeah, because it bent the body. So one can come, either one can come first. But you end up with both. But the good news is, if you fix either, that brings up the question, which is most important, the structure or the mind? Well, why not work on both? You can't work on both. I'll tell you quickly a true story. I had a patient come to my office that wanted to have a peripheral exam done. I didn't know him. I didn't talk to him other than I knew he wanted that exam. So I had my x-ray people go in and take x-rays of him, mark the x-rays, put all these angles on here. I walked in and saw him for the first time. I looked at his x-ray numbers, his films on the board. He said, I've heard a lot about this. I'd like you to tell me what I need to do. I said, okay, here's what you do. Get a notepad, make some notes. So he wrote down some notes. And I said, okay, you go out and do that, and then you come back and we'll check you. And he went out and left. Well, we sent birthday cards out and Christmas cards. Well, they all came back. So he was gone. No phone, he's gone. Never heard a word. Almost a year later, he walked into the door, walked up to the front desk and said, I'm here for a reeval. And they came back and told me, he's here for a reeval. What do we do? I said, reeval, go take new pictures. I'm hang him up. I'll go and talk to him. So I went in, I didn't remember. He looked different. I didn't recognize him, but I looked at his films. And he had made tremendous improvement all by himself with no therapy whatsoever, other than he did what it was recommended. He made tremendous improvement. Became near normal. And he left. I never saw him again. To me, it was exciting. Okay, so let's go back to the diagram. Let's go up to the top. We're looking now at this picture right here. How far can the head go forward or back and still be okay? I have the numbers written down there in millimeters. It says 25A, that means anterior, forward. 0 is perfect, 25 posterior. That's the normal range. So when you're standing up, looking from the side, the head should be within 1 inch. So when we talk about standing on the T-zone and getting neutral, we're talking about getting the center weight of the head directly over the shoulders, the center of the low back, the knee, and the lateral malatus on the foot. That's
I have a
what
question
that means.
about
Pardon?
when you're talking about that moving out of line 1 inch, or are you measuring? I mean, if it's just your head moving, then it's causing an angle. So you measure down here, you're measuring up here. Where are you measuring?
When we mark the X-rays, we put a dot right in the center of the neck at the C2 vertebra, where the center weight of the head is. We then draw a line straight down to the front portion of the sacrum. The sacrum is that group of bones that fits between the hips. That's where all the weight should be, directly above that point. That's what we measure. Now, back to your question. Let's suppose this is you have a good low back curve, you have a good thoracic curve, you get up here and the head is forward. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's look at the numbers. Go to your chart.
So you're looking at the side like this to measure from that, where straight up would be, at the level of his ear, it's an inch.
The center of the ear should be directly vertical to the center of the shoulder.
Okay.
That's looking from the outside. When we look at the x-ray, we're looking at the inside, but they correlate. Now, if a person head goes too far forward, then they become aggressive, assertive. And the further they go, the more aggressive they get. And if they go, when they go forward, the head to defend against being forward tips up. So they become the occiput. The occiput normally is 0 to 7. If it goes up, it becomes stubborn. Atlas has to do with the heart or the feeling. The head and the heart, atlas and the occiput need to be in harmony with each other. What you think and what you feel. We're going down, that can be confusing. Down to the thoracic spine. Look at the letter T1 equals 25. Then go down further, it says T12 equals 25. So those vertebrae should be 25 degrees. So when we draw a line along the bottom of the vertebra, that's where they should be. Now if they go too high, this is common on women, men too, but women have a tendency to have head forward posture, have rounded upper back. It's called a dowager's hump. When they have a dowager's hump, it affects their thinking and they don't like themselves. So when you are around people who have high T1 angle, you can guarantee they have a lot of things they don't like about themselves. Now sometimes it's more conscious, so it'll be more dominant when they stand. Sometimes it's more subconscious, will show up more when they sit. In real life practice, we had both pictures, so we could compare which is dominant, conscious or subconscious. But what you need to know is, for you, if you have, let me give you a homework assignment. If you think the T1 angle is high, you rounded shoulder, head forward, steep angle, make a list of things you don't like about you.
How do you know if they're subconscious?
You don't, but if you're willing to make the list, and you say, okay, I'm gonna make a list of things I don't like about me. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you make the list. And you're really serious about it. Your subconscious will tell you, it's conscious mind. Probably not today, sometime next week.
In the middle of the night.
Pardon?
In the middle of the night,
Yeah,
something will pop in your mind.
something will pop in your mind. It comes out of the subconscious. And that's, honestly, the subconscious mind is where most of the serious problems exist. It's from abnormal programming. And what we're talking about is the spirit is neutral, but the spirit lives in a body you have deformed by stinking thinking, by false input. You've either somebody lied to you, or you lied to yourself. It's not in harmony with who you really are. And the goal is to clear it all up, to get rid of the issues, the loops, the issues that are keeping you from being neutral.
Does the Dowers hump have something to do with the anger too? Because it seems like you kind of would pull your head forward with that hump.
No. Anger is more low back. Anger is more down and
I meant aggressiveness.
yes,
Okay.
yes. If you have either male or female who has head forward posture, high damages hump, and angry, don't be her friend.
Move over and let her pass.
You let it go. And just say, I'll help, if you want help, I'm here, but I'm not gonna try to bend you, fix you. So in fact, somebody in Monday's class asked, so when you're trying to help people change, I said, okay, stop. You don't change other people, you change yourself. And if you change other people, they don't stay, and it doesn't work. Let's go on down. So let's talk about anger and the lumbar curve. A lot of good people have negative experience that for some reason or another, they get angry. And because they're good people, they just internalize the anger. They don't stir the soup, rock the boat, they just internalize it. Technically holding in crap. When they hold in crap, they get constipated. They then have a lot of problems in that region of the body. The sacral angle, like we talked about that earlier, that's the foundation of the spine. The foundation should be at about 45 degrees. That's the normal angle of that area of the body. And if it's too high, they have hypersexuality. So a lot of young kids get into problems because they get too wrapped up in sex, and it creates a hypersexuality. It creates a lot of problems. I dealt with those people, kids, and we address it. Same is true if it goes low. If that angle goes low, the lower it gets, the less desire a person has to live. If that goes negative, then they develop a death wish. So when people are down like this, backing off, reversing the lumbar curve, the brain doesn't work the same. The brain malfunctions because they put undue pressure on the structure to exceed tertiary tolerance. Now, that's real too. I've had patients that I've said to them, right, plain, flat out, you appear to have had you appear to have death wish. Talk to me about your suicide thoughts. And every time I said that, they come forth and say, yeah. So we talk about it. Even young kids. One young child, a boy, he was 8 at that time. When I checked him, his hips were way crooked. He had a lot of torque in his back and a lot of internalized anger. So I sat this guy down and I said, okay, I'm here to check you. I want to know why you want to kill your dad. And he told me why he wanted to kill his dad. Now, that boy I told his mom and dad, we have to modify the words we use around that boy. We have to change his structure. We have to work on his head and his heart, or he will end up probably before he's 15 in some kind of a juvenile care center, and if he makes it that far. So it's real. I had another fellow who, going back to the circle I drew for you, on society, on number 4, he had a 20 millimeter left pelvic drop. He had no support in society, none. he was a loner, he was married, and he was a business person, he had a good job, but he had a lot of low back pain. And his main cause of the pain was emotional lack of support. And I recommended to him, you must get some male support. Join a church, join a club, get some friends. You need friends to support you. Relationships is the word I use. You need relationships to help support you. Well, he didn't do it. A year later, I took films again. He had the same pattern. And I told him, his name was Dave. He said, Dave, it's really important that you get that support because you know you have a lot of trouble. Well, about 2 months later, he went over to the Garden of the Gods one morning and shot himself in the chin. Wrote his wife a nice little note, said, I'm done. I can't deal with the life anymore. I have no support. Boom. So the moral to that story, and I would like to say it to you now, is when we talk about health and being healthy, and there are books written. I read one, the title was Who Gets Sick? And it has who gets sick. So it had a whole dissertation on the different kinds of problems that people have, they get sick. And the most prominent age group and gender group that go see doctors are females, 30 to 55, somewhere in that age group. They chronically go and they go and they go and they go, and then they never get healthy. They don't get healthy because they don't do what I call a whole holistic approach. You have to do the whole triangle all the time. So you go around the triangle, around the triangle, around the triangle, and you try to get your body neutral, get your mind neutral, get your chemistry neutral. Now,
Dad, can you touch just quickly on how the pelvic drop has to do with being responsible for yourself?
yes, thank you. So, in light of that question, and that's one of the things I always look for when I looked at the x-ray, is the level of the hip correlates with what Deborah mentioned. Who's responsible for me? If it's 0 to 5, if it's 0 to 5 on side of gender, that means male left, female right, then you are. If it's further down, then it goes out further in the circle. So family, spouse, okay? If it goes out further, it could be church or society. So the greater the drop, the further away from self. So one of the affirmations that is what the healthy people say and do and think is this: if it's going to be, it's up to me. Okay? If it's going to be, it's up to me. Right now, we have a big arm wrestle going on because right now the government is trying to tell you they're responsible for you and you better do it their way. And that's a lie. That's total deception. If you believe that, you're going to be sick. You have to be responsible for yourself. Not the doctor, not the bishop, not the government, not the IRS. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And that, you have to take that attitude and focus on being neutral and being centered. Thank you for that question. Any other questions as we finish here? Now, I had people who come to the class. I used to teach this class one time a month. Every month I taught this class. And in the class we'd hang up the x-rays and we'd look at real people and real numbers and talk about real problems. But the reason I did every month is because about 1/3 of my practice, the main problems were not in the spine. the main problems were up here, mental, emotional, spiritual. It was in the patterns of the way they behaved. And so I would try to help them modify their patterns. When they modify their patterns, then their spine needed less care. They had better absorption of the food they ate. All things work better when the head is neutral. Any questions? I had a couple of people who would get a pain. And they get a pain in the neck or the shoulder, the low back, they go and get the sheet out and say, okay, what could it be? What could it be? And most of the time they could identify an emotional corollary and make an improvement.